Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you're enjoying the content, please drop us up, drop a like, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Also, please consider supporting our podcast via the link below. It really helps us out.
Desh, welcome to the World XP podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. Thank you for inviting me.
100%. So let's do a quick intro. Tell the people who you are and what you do. And then we will jump into a question from the last guest, and we'll jump into everything that you're doing and the projects that you got going on, and excited for the conversation.
Of course. So currently, I'm CEO of Gott Data, which is a company I founded about 2 years ago. And basically, what we do is we are doing data and tech consulting, and we're also building some of our own AI products. Um, and our goal is to help humans do good with data. So basically, like a long time ago, I had idea of like having a good data company, and in Icelandic, "gott" means good. So basically, it's just called Good Data. That's what the company is.
Very nice. Question from the last guest, who actually, guest, he was running for Congress, and he's also a very big data guy. He's a data analyst, and so we
Mm,
got into that
mhm.
conversation as well.
Uh-huh.
But his question is, what is one thing that you should really throw out? And I don't know exactly what he meant by that, so interpret it however you want.
Wow, that is a very profound question in many ways. Let me try to answer it from my experience, and I will say this. Um, I don't technically like to throw out anything from data because I think it's very subject matter thing. Like what I do is pretty much what we do at Gott Data is like we'll separate it out and we'll keep it for something else. We never really throw them out. But in terms of like, I do understand what he probably or she probably meant in terms of meaning what you should probably throw out. And that is basically there are a lot of times where you have in terms of data, like things that are outliers, let's say, which are maybe human errors or completely skews the things. So just for example, like in a way, like if you are looking at historical data and then you put COVID data in there, like and your business performance COVID data, I think that doesn't make sense to put it because it was a different kind of environment, different kind of scenario, different kind of model. So you might want to separate it out. So I think that's probably what you meant, and that's what probably I would say like is to separate it out instead of throw it out.
Yeah, that's a great answer. This is why I do this kind of, I'll call it a segment, I guess, is because you get different interpretations of different questions. Like even if the
Mhm.
same person asks a question and the person I'm talking to is like a life coach, they'll be like, "Oh, you should throw out negativity in your life." I don't know. But
Yeah,
like you can get a
yeah,
different interpretation of all these sorts of questions.
yeah.
And it's super cool for sure.
Hmm.
So okay, so you started your own. Actually, so let's take a couple steps back into um, where did the interest in data come from? One of the things that I mentioned to Bentley, he's the guy running for Congress, was there's kind of
Yeah.
like two sort of data situations.
Mm,
Um, One is kind of where you've got data or like statistics where you can have
hmm.
all these numbers, and if I want to
Hmm.
prove a point, I bet I can
Hmm.
pull out a study or some numbers that prove my point. And by the same token, if somebody's like, no, Eric, doesn't make any sense, they can go find the
Hmm.
study and the numbers to exactly prove my point wrong, even though,
Yeah.
right? So there's lots of data to sift through that's in the world today. And then
Hmm.
the second kind of piece of that is with all the big tech companies, like
Hmm.
you are the product, your data that goes out there for advertisers and all
Hmm.
those things, right? So there's
Hmm.
kind of two sets in it, and I was super interested to see what he thought about that. So I'll extend the same question to you. Do you have thoughts on both of those kind of things, or do you have a third maybe way that data is kind of applicable in our lives, or how do you feel generally about data, and how do you get interested in it as a,
Hmm.
I want to do this as a job slash business?
Yeah. 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 So just from my personal experience, like I've always been the numbers guy, if you may say, like put me in like a trying to like put me in a box, then that would probably be the box that I'd fit in. Like I'd be surrounded by numbers. So I first studied physics, where basically all the models and calculations we do are data, right? Like numbers all the time. Like you do predictions or you do linear regressions, all of those kind of like fit in there. Then of course, like my master's was in accounting and economics, which is again numbers and things. So like surrounded by numbers, which is the most relevant data that we know of, or not, lack of the better word, not relevant, but most used to data we are, right? Like we are in terms of numbers, like quantitative numbers. Of course, then you have the qualitative side of the data, like which is like what we're doing now. Like this is like, like a video interview or anything. This is a different kind of data. So we're surrounded by it, and I was surrounded by it just because like what I was studying, what I was doing, and things. But really, in terms of like how data can impact your business or people in general, I didn't realize until I really got into the workforce, right? And that is when I started seeing all these numbers that I'm in my day-to-day job, and I'm seeing these numbers and how you can improve things. Like you have some digital marketing campaign going on in Google Analytics, and basically we see that information and we move it around, right? Like you ask someone, oh, give me the report from our last campaign, and you're moving it around and you're doing it. But for me, like when I was looking at those things, I was like, okay, we have these numbers, how can we better this performance? And performance comes down to people making actions, right, which we call decisions. So for me, like it was at that point, like it was always, how do you help people, give them the right information, and how you can make their decision making process better, and how you can account for those decisions, right? So that is how I really got into it, and that's why like I um, started doing a lot of these things and started learning data science, and um, making like, like once you have that historical data and what your present is, you want to get competitive advantage by knowing how you can predict something, or like a lot of times when we're talking about like predictions, we're like 80% true and things like 80% accurate or something like that, and we tend to think like, oh, that is like 80% of the times it will be true, but in reality what it is giving you is not the certainty of it, but control over it, right? Like knowing that if I do this action, if I make this decision now, I will be a little bit better than what my just human brain would be, yes or no kind of situation, right? So that's, in a nutshell, like that is kind of like how I got into it. um can you I forgot like what you said about those two
Yeah.
points.
So
So
we'll go with the first piece
yeah,
first, and I think maybe I would guess that this might be a piece of your company, the level
yeah,
of trust in the kind of data that you produce and acquire and how it's framed. Like
yeah.
the kind of easiest example, or at least the one that I just thought of off the top of my head, would be where you've got economic data and it's super
Mm,
zoomed in, like on the
yeah,
Great Depression, and you're like, oh my gosh, the economy is
yeah,
horrible.
yeah.
It's going nowhere, and then you zoom out, and then it's been constantly going up for the last 100 years or whatever. And so the framing of the data can be super important, and I would imagine that
Mm,
part of your company, and that would be something that you would have learned how to do or needed to learn how to do, and then
mm-hmm,
that your clients or customers trust in you and your company,
yeah,
and the products that you're producing is, oh, we
mm,
know that they're going to frame this in a uh for lack of a better word, it's 7 in the morning, an honest way. um so what are your thoughts on that sort of phenomenon? Because I think it's quite interesting, right? You see people in the news now, they can pull out a graph and say, oh, this trend is going down, and then you go on to the news of we'll say the
mm,
other side, and they've
yeah.
got a different graph from the same sort of data sets, and maybe they tweaked one or two things, and all of a sudden it's showing the complete opposite, right? So
Absolutely. I think you hit so many points in that part. Like I think, like, and I think I'm going to try to best to break it down for our listeners. Um, One is the trust, right? The trust comes from the data quality. What kind of data you have? What was the time lag in between? Um, is it real time? And if it is real time, how correct that data is, right? And this, not even if talking about like a macroeconomic or politics, like US elections kind of data, like even if you think about a small business who is making a t-shirt and selling that, that is the most crucial part. Now the part of it is like, the other part of it is like, how do you break the silos of data that exists within your organization and also around the world, right? In many ways, like you, uh, for example, zooming out from one use case or versus like connecting several dots, right? A lot of times, like for example, politicians will say like, oh wow, our economy is doing so good because our Dow Jones or stock market is off the roof, and a lot of times like we do say that and we can pick and choose to convince people that something is going well, but in reality it may not be, because in a way, like we live in this very complex, connected world, like I think like it's like very easy for us to sometimes go in there and just say, like, oh, just this box, just if you just think about this box, everything will be okay. This is the only thing you need to understand. And I think that is like the biggest disservice we do, by making things just be like, oh, like this is just a part of it. I think like if you are able to connect all of those dots and show the whole picture as much as possible, I think you do better for the humans involved in it and also society as a whole. Um, and I'll give you like one example of it, like how we do uh, internally. So for me, like for instance, if you think about it, like all these tech job firings that have been happening over the years, and I think for me it's like completely unacceptable if you think about it, because these companies have so much data. They are just saying like, oh, we didn't expect the economy to go bad, or we didn't expect this like COVID thing will correct itself, or things like that. But in reality, like you have all of this information. You have all of the, you have inflation rates, you have all of these KPIs that are out there, and what we're not doing, and I don't blame them for that, like we're not monitoring them. In an ideal world, you would hire people before your work peak comes in, right? So you have people who are trained at the peak, and then you extend the work more so you can get more out of the workforce. But what we tend to do is we tend to hire when the peak has passed, because people complain like, oh, I'm overworked, I haven't gotten holiday in 2 weeks, and that's when we start the hiring process, right? So like it's like kind of late. But I think like it's, the thing is like, what this is a very good example what you're saying, like these data exist, these macroeconomic data exist, these other things in your company, even like in our company, like we have data from Google Analytics coming in, which is a very good indicator of how much sales we'll have in the future. It may not be certain, like I said, but we have some sort of control over it. We have finance data, we have hours that people are working data, we have all of this data. If you are able to put them side by side, you could have a very good picture of like how it works, right? So I think that's why like that framing part is super super important. And if you can connect those isolated data like that exist in silos around our organizations or on different parts of internet, um, you can do something good with it. So what we are doing in our case is like we have a lot of this data, macroeconomic data and things, and we have been collecting a lot of these things, because for us it gives us a very good competitive edge in terms of like knowing where the new markets are, especially if you're talking about AI and how this AI revolution will change the way we work and things. I think one of the main things is going to be that the emerging markets that are around the world will probably come a little bit in a better playing field with the developed world. So you have like whole new markets opening up, but once they're opened up and a lot of businesses have gone in there and selling their products, if you go there, it's maybe a little bit late. So how do you go there a little bit early, right? So having that information is super crucial for us. So that's what we're doing, and we're providing this as a complimentary service to our clients who are doing consulting or asking for us, like for example, what could they do better with tourism ads in Iceland, for example, let's say, like then we could say like, like if you target this part of the world actually is traveling more because we can support that by data that's already giving them more value, right?
Yeah.
So So we have all of this connected, and we have it in a research hub where our internal users and our customers are using it.
Yeah, I want to add maybe to where you talked about the tech layoffs,
Yeah,
and that all those companies would have had that data. I think
yeah,
part of it also, yes, the timing maybe
hmm
is a little strange, but I also, or not strange, but I
yeah,
think for some of them maybe that saying, oh, we didn't know that the economy was going to go bad. I feel like that's a kind
yeah,
of a convenient excuse for them because they probably saw
yeah,
what happened with X or Twitter and how
yeah,
they got rid of 75% of the staff and then nobody like the users I didn't notice that he got 75% of the that he
yeah,
got rid of 75% of Twitter and maybe some of it is just cutting out a bloated maybe like bureaucracy
yeah,
within the big companies. So
mm,
um in terms of it being uh unacceptable, it's like yeah, but also businesses make business decisions at the end of the day, and so maybe it's like a convenient excuse for them. I don't know, right? I just wanted
yeah,
to add that because
hmm
there's a lot you hear a lot of talk about that like why are we paying these consultants or why are we paying these people or why are we doing that? Like, do we really need all these people to do this job? If like
yeah,
yeah. So there's all that as well, and then especially um with AI coming as well to take some of the workload
hmm
from the humans, for lack of a better word. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to add that, but also the AI piece is a little bit interesting because I economically I was talking
mm,
to oh I don't even remember who it was. But at some point, right, you've got systems that grow up until the point of max capacity, and
mm,
um, then you kind of need a new system. And so, for example, like if you look back into maybe the early 1900s, right, it seems like we've not really made and and people listening, do not take this out of context because it's not completely what I mean. When I say we haven't really made technological advancements, it's like there's been okay, so we got flight, and now we just do flight better. We have
mm,
cars, now we just do cars better. We have a
mm,
phone, now we just have phones better. But there's not been like a new thing until AI kind of. But even so, it's like the large language models are really just kind of data aggregators.
mm,
Um, and so I'm wondering what the next, like I feel like we're due maybe for a next big thing. And so I'm wondering
yeah,
where that will that where that will take us. And so the AI mentioned right now for data, it's like we're going into new markets, but it seems like
mm,
at some point we'll run out of markets because we haven't made that new like big breakthrough
mm,
for lack of a better
hmm
word. I don't know. What are your
yeah,
thoughts on that? Like, because you're just looking at numbers of money's going into here maybe or sales
mm,
for this product are going there. Like, what are your
yeah,
thoughts on that sort of situation, the technological advancement of things, right? Because AI is going to help you guys with the data, crunching the numbers and finding
yeah.
patterns that maybe you otherwise wouldn't
mm.
find.
Yeah, so let me break down into two near future or two futuristic kind of view, right? Like one is the near future, and which is kind of like what we're doing now, is if you take the day in the life of a data analyst, what does a data analyst do, right? Data analyst gets a data request from sales, for example. Then the data analyst will go and query it out of data warehouse, data lake, and all of these things where we have all of this data, which is curated data for sales, for example. We'll pull it and show it to the stakeholder, either through dashboard, reports, Excel files, some algorithm and prediction, and they will get that. That's basically what the data analyst is doing. This is like in most of the kind of companies, this is what is happening. In reality, like what I think is what we should be using data analysts for is that uh, they are analysts. They are one of your best critical thinkers, analytical minds in your work organization. They should be analyzing deeper into that data, giving these salespeople what you more important inferences and insights so they can do their job better, right? Um, but in reality, like very few analysts get to do or analyze things. That is the reality of the situation because the data needs are very important and urgent almost all of the time, because the salespeople need to sell more so the other people have jobs, right? Or like, I'm just using one example. This could be in any other domain. You can put it HR, whatever, like it will be the same. So right now with the AI, a lot of jobs that are being automated are data related jobs, because these jobs are redundant. Like I said in this example, you're doing query and moving the information. B, they're expensive workforce, because the data jobs are new and relatively new if you put grand scheme of things. So usually when jobs get automated, they are the expensive jobs that get automated over less expensive jobs, right? And that is the market we live in. That's how it works. So in this case, like for us, what is more important is that our analysts get to analyze things, get best information, use the AI tools that they have. We have in our organization, we have 3 AI products that we built, and this lets them do it in 3 aspects. One is basically like it lets them automate these processes where the querying and things is all AI assistant there to do that. Second is that we are able to talk to this data. So we have a product called Moonin, which we'll be releasing soon to the public as well. Like, and it will be like you are able to go and feed the data in, and you can create as many chatbots as you like. And so, like for us internally, I have a sales chatbot where I go and ask, what are sales predictions? What is our sales numbers and things? And then chatbot just tells us information. So as a decision maker, I have 2 things there. One is a dashboard on the side, which gives me real-time information, and a chatbot, which is telling me what actual situation is, and is connected to our algorithms, which gives us predictions in how our things will be. So this is like a very interesting tool. Like analysts are getting AI assistants to do things faster, better, go into it. As a decision maker, I have AI tools to pull all of this information, interact with it in a different way, right? For the longest time, we were stuck in the dashboard, which when built with very good thinking and clear data and things, can be a very, very powerful tool. But dashboards in the end are built with it's kind of like sunglasses with like a different shade in it. Like if you have a brown sunglasses, you'll see world as brown. And dashboards have that limitation if you think about it, because whoever built it had their idea of it, and maybe you're missing some things in it. So that is one thing. So this is the near future situation where I think AI will power us to make decisions better, quicker, and help our analysts and critical minds do a better job, right? Then now the second part of it, uh, which is like, I think, which I am super, super excited about. And that is there are several emerging technologies going on around the same time. So we have AI, which is not even the close. I mean, we're quite far away from the AGI, which is the general artificial intelligence. And when that comes, that will be a different whole game. But even if you're looking at the current state of AI and how good they've become, like OpenAI just released a reasoning model, which could be a game changer, for example, right? But that is one thing, AGI. Then you have, before the ChatGPT paper or the ChatGPT was released, there was another algorithm that came in, and which was like, it is very less talked about. But I think like it's important to notice it here, because what that algorithm did was, so if you have 2 matrices in mathematics, you multiply them. There's a common way you multiply them, right? And for
Right.
about 200, 300 years, we had the same kind of steps that we did. This AI came in and solved it in like 30% less steps. Like, I'm making up the 30%, but X% less steps. Now this impacts quite a bit, because if this algorithm is like implemented in our matrix applications, multiplications, which is the base of all of our computation, so processors and things, then you could have a same processor and have a little bit better processing capabilities, right? And the reason I mention it is because our processors, GPUs, are getting more efficient, which means we have more computation power, which means things like this will give us more bigger algorithms, which gives us like more different kinds of AI, right? We're just talking about like large language models right now, but different ones. Then you have extended reality, which kind of like has been gone down the road a little bit. Sometimes it comes up, sometimes it goes down. But extended reality is getting to the point where it will become a very household thing. And I mentioned that because when you had app, for example, app boom, at first you had to develop it in iOS and Android systems, and you would do that. When you were able to build apps on the web and just have a web form, that's when the app explosion started, right? Like you had thousands of apps being deployed in Apple Store and things within a day or two. That is where we're getting closer to the extended reality part. And with extended reality, you have the augmented reality and virtual reality both together. That interests me quite a bit, because until now, what we've been doing is that we've been mostly interacting with our data on dashboards or Excel files. Now you'll come to a point where you would have digital twins of your model, like room temperature. You have a 3D kind of model and you're interacting with data. That it makes us like, like it makes things very different. You're walking down the road, or you have glasses, and you'll be able to read reviews of the restaurants without going into your phone or things, like this, like
Yeah.
futuristic world. Like it's quite interesting. And then finally, like you add quantum computing into it, which is going really fast. I think like United States of America, Northern Europe, and also like Barcelona here, like Barcelona Supercomputing Unit. There's a lot of good work being done with that. Um, so when quantum computing comes in, then what you're looking at is not to put that fear of, oh, like quantum computers will break all of our codes and steal all our money kind of thing. But basically, like what quantum computing will do is that there are a lot of problems that we have just left it, because we're like, we don't have the computation power right now, so let's not even bother about it, right? We just left it on the side, and we use our classical traditional computers to solve problems that are more equipped for it. So quantum computing, you have a lot of those things which will open it, and there will be a new set of problems we'll be tackling. So which means, like, in the futurist in me is very excited about it. When you combine all of these three together, we're looking at incredible advancement in health sciences. You're looking at incredible advancement in new jobs being created in a different way. I think like there will be big fluctuation with like how we do work, but I think there is a different world in that futuristic model
Yeah.
in my head.
Yeah. I think part of me feels like the quantum piece is like the thing that will unlock
Yeah.
um other stuff, right? In terms of like flight, for example, or things like that, the ability to go faster, further, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Like change the way that we do things. Kind of, it's the next breakthrough in physics, really. That will be, well, that's what it was
Yep.
for like flight and driving. It's like,
Yep.
okay, now
Yep.
we've got a combustion engine. Like that's a new thing
Mm-hmm.
in physics. It's
Mm-hmm.
right. Both of those are different kinds of physics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thermodynamics versus flight versus whatever.
Yep.
Um, but the other piece to that is the energy cost
Right.
and the battery technology. And
Mm.
that, in terms of energy, battery technology for the time being is really, unless you're using nuclear battery
Mm-hmm.
technology, it seems to me, right? I'm not an energy like expert or whatever,
Yep.
but from all the people
Yep.
I've talked to on the podcast and
Yep.
the research that I've done, it
Yeah. Yeah.
seems like battery tech is the
Mm.
thing that's really
Mm.
holding us back in terms of the
Yep.
computational power, right? You talk
Yep.
about even like Bitcoin mining and the power draw
Mm.
that takes. And
Mm-hmm.
so obviously we're in a bit of a pickle with where we get lithium and cobalt and all these things that are in the
Right.
batteries, right? They're from mines
Mm.
in Africa. Um,
Mm.
and so I don't I don't know if you've looked into this at all, but
Yep.
that's going to be an issue for at least for the foreseeable future until that problem is solved as well.
Yep. Absolutely. I think that's a very, very good point. And I think like there's two ways to think about it. One is, of course, just if you just look at AI, the computation need of AI, the energy needs of AI is humongous. Like, I mean, um, a simple Google search versus a simple prompt to ChatGPT, the computation is quite different, right? I think like the energy consumption is quite different with that. And when you add that by thousands of people, billions of people doing that, it's quite a bit. So there are, I think, there's. Let me just start with saying, like, first, like, there are good things happening around that. Like, I think the perception of nuclear energy is changing. There's more investment in green energy around the world, not just in the developed countries, but around the world, and that is going to be a little bit good. The lithium, cobalt, these essential minerals or elements needed for a good battery and things that are there, and I'll let the battery experts talk about that in the future. But I think, like, there's also one other angle that is missing, and that is what we're focused on when we are doing it, is that you produce, let's say, uh, X amount of energy, electricity, and you distribute it across your big electric grids. A lot of times, what is happening is that you don't have a very good, efficient distribution happening in these grids, because you're losing a lot of that, because you have the alternate current and you lose it along the way. So, what if you had a better algorithm that would actually distribute it better, more efficiently, right? I think that that part of equation is quite interesting to follow. So we are actually doing one GPT like model to train it to distribute it better. I think, like, if you think, because if you look at the GPT kind of structure that you have for um, large language model, if you put that on electric grid, it works quite well. Like, it works better than a lot of different algorithms you have, because it's kind of like the bigger the structure, bigger the distribution network, it understands better, it delivers it better. So I think, like, that is like one way of doing it, and this is like one of our internal research projects. We're doing it, and our goal is to have this kind of tool for um, emerging countries more, because I think, like, if you look at it, like, um, there's so much potential in developing world that is not being there because of the energy resources aren't there. For developed nations, you can put in money into newer nuclear plants and these things. A lot of times, like, a developing country like Nepal or Sierra Leone or them won't have that until they go to World Bank and get that information, right? So for us, like, it's like a twofold thing, and that's why we are looking into it. And that is also like a very interesting way to look at it. Like, how about, like, we create micro energy grids and distribute electricity efficiently and try to power that in local areas.
Yeah. The other thing I think with the power grids is sometimes it's easier just to build a new one than it is to upgrade an
Yeah.
old one.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about the developing world versus kind of the West, well, the West is not the only,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. Um,
Yeah.
we've got a bunch of old power plants, power grids, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm.
It almost might be easier to go into the developing world and try some of these things, even if the infrastructure is not there,
Yeah.
just
Mm-hmm.
because then you have to, like, if you're gonna tear one down in the
Yeah.
US, for instance, then you have to find a way to still give all these people energy while you're
Yeah.
fiddling with it and upgrading it
Mm.
and all these things, and it
Mm.
becomes much
Mm-hmm.
more of a headache for you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you mentioned Nepal. Um,
Yeah.
how we got introduced for those listening. Ian, who's been on the show before, he's a
Yeah.
sports diplomat. It's the coolest job title in the world. Um, so Ian and Desh are working together on a kind of data project or data company um for soccer, and
Mm.
Nepal is something that they're doing. So before we get to the Nepal trip, let's
Yeah.
talk to the data project, how you ended up with uh soccer, or what the kind of the creation of
Mm.
that was looking like. For
Mm.
those who've been paying a lot of attention to the soccer world, it's
Yeah.
super data driven, right? The
Mm.
money ball phenomena from baseball back in what
Yeah.
90s, I think it was.
Yeah.
Um, and for those listening who know when that was, don't kill me in the comments. Sorry. Um, but yeah, talk to that a little bit and kind of how that started, where the ideas came from, because I think it's
Mm.
going to be a really it's interesting with sports data because like basketball is very heavy in it as well.
Yeah.
there's only so much. There's a game, and there's only so
Yeah.
many. There's so many actions that you can record,
Mm.
or kind of measure the impact of a player. So talk to that. Like what the idea was, and all the things that you guys have found so far, what you guys are planning to
Mm.
do. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so just to go back a little bit in time, like always been a soccer lover. Like started playing when I was a kid in the foothills of Himalayas, and just kept playing, and that's how I know Ian, because like, we played together. And also like Ian was my college roommate, so that's where the connection comes from. But he's been doing this amazing work, going around the world and doing sports diplomacy, and uh, continuing with his passion for soccer. And so for us, like it's been a while, like we've been working on this together, and then the idea is that like we would have a database of as much data as possible related to soccer. And that includes like individual player performances and things like that, and have it there, and then we can use that information to maybe also help young athletes coming up. So for that, like I think there's like a very good potential with that, as because like we have like really good data around the internet. A lot of them are behind the paywall or proprietary data that you cannot use, but you can only see the end information. But our goal is that like we can make it as open and free to use for any upcoming athlete as much as possible, and potentially also develop it into a service that we can help high school coaches and university coaches to use that information to help better the players they have. Um, so that is like the idea we've been working on, and we've been building the tech and things behind it, and collecting as much as data as possible that we can, and create tools for players to have their data automated. And that brings me to the other part, which is like the wearables that we have now is quite good. We've come to a point where 5-10 years ago, like you had to sell your house to buy one of them, but now like you come to a point that they're commercially produced, they collect very good data, and then you can use that data to monitor it, right, and get information. I have a simple watch that I wear when I'm playing these days, and the amount of information I have from it is quite incredible, right? Like quite incredible, like how I can see where I was on the pitch versus things. And when I was young, and I had that, if I had that data, I would have probably been like 5 or 10% better than what I was, just with that, because I could monitor it. So we want to make this process better, and this is where we are. So this is the project we're doing, and the other part, which is we're going to Nepal, is a bit different, but we're doing it together. And so Ian comes from the sports diplomacy, so sports for good program. Like he goes around the world and does good, help people, empower them to gain through sports, and then later apply that in their leadership and life. And we do data for good. So if you can combine data for good and sports for good, and help people, that could be something. So our project in Nepal is that we're going there, and we're going to train some young women, young ladies who are just coming out. They all come from rural areas, and they are basically, for them, it's a life-changing experience, and there's like a lot of good work being done there already, and we're going to try to partner with them as much as possible, the organizations that are doing it. And our goal is to help them develop these skills better, and we'll be running a camp there where we can do um, both the sports program and combine it with the digital literacy program. So just to put it into context, we were talking about AI earlier, um, but in a way, like we all have been, at least our age group, we've all been like preparing for it step by step, right? We did see the internet revolution, we saw the smartphones, we saw the computation capabilities increasing through our own eyes. Then you have the social media, and all of these things coming together has made what ChatGPT possible. Because like in a way, like if you think about it, the first machine learning algorithm was published in 1960s, 1970s, like it's not a new thing, but all of these things are coming together. Now, if you think about it, like if you're growing up in the foothills of the Himalayas where you did not have 4G, 5G internet or a computer device, you are getting the phone now, which is smartphones. You're getting 5G internet. Like, I couldn't imagine like you could send a selfie from Mount Everest, but you can do that now. Like it's a quite different world out there, and they're getting all of that thing in one go. Like the kids, like who has never seen any of that. So for them, like it's for us, like we can see some images and be like, oh, maybe this is AI generated. For them, there's no clue sometimes, like they have no help. And also, like if you think about like the dark side of the web, which we kind of like monitor and block it and things like that, they don't have that. Um so I think like doing this kind of program where we can do that, explain to them where this technology is coming from, where how they can use it to better their lives, plus also like decipher what is right for them and what is not, can probably have a big impact on them. So that's why like we're combining these two, and then we're doing that in Nepal. That is like one of our flagship projects that we're starting, and this is the first one. So let's see how that goes.
Yeah. Um, Not to completely be Debbie Downer, but did you see the story? There was some tribe in the Amazon that
Yeah,
some people went out and they gave them, or I don't remember if it was exactly Amazon, but they
yeah.
gave them phones, and then all of a sudden, like nobody was hunting anymore because they were addicted to the phones.
I haven't read it, but that just sounds so much like it.
Yeah. So I don't
Not
know. Have you
surprising.
guys considered that or thought of that?
I think so. For example, uh, I have been actively, for example, blocking my phone, just
For
putting
them, I
it in.
meant when you go like give the technology to them, and then it's all of a sudden like a new thing. Like it's where, like you said, we've done it step by step, but they're getting it
Yeah.
in one go. Has there
Hmm.
been kind of a, I don't know if training is the right word, but some kind of like, hey, we're giving you this thing.
Mm.
Don't put it by your bed at night, like all of us do, because we're degenerates. So I don't know, like, I don't know. No, like it sounds great what you guys are doing, but that
Yeah.
was the thing that popped into my head, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'll ask. But
Yeah. No, I think like that's a very very good point, and I think that we must think about it, right? I think like for example, if you tell a teenager don't do something, they're probably gonna go do it.
well,
You
that's
know.
true.
Right, so I think like what we can do the best is that like with these young people, I think our I think like we are looking at like a change in how we do things, because the young generation is quite well suited for the current world than we were, for example, I think. And I think like what we can do is like give them the right information. We can give them like where this is coming from. uh, this is the effects that we know of, these are the consequences we know of, and I think we should trust on them to make the best decision for themselves. I think that is it. The other part of it, what you're saying is like, for example, these kids, they are much more technologically advanced than their parents are. And that's because their parents never had, their school teachers never had any of these devices with them. Like if you go up in the Himalayas, like barely uh, in electricity isn't even there, right? So they're getting all of that together. So like, how do you actually help their parents also put those guardrails around them in a safe and better way, right? I think it's not just them per se. I think that's a different thing. So I think like there's like a lot of community and cultural things involved with it. I think there's also like a very good potential. Like if you have in if mountains, like you have like these mountain goats, and you have like these Kashmir or pashmina sweaters, and that's been sold in the international market. They make it, they sell it for X amount of rupees, and then in the international market it goes for times 100 times the USD, and they're not getting the fair share out of it. I think like them being able to sell that directly is a very very good thing we'll be doing to the world, right? In general, we must agree on that. But for them, like that part, with the technology, like the parents and the older adults, and helping them equip that. But at the same time, bringing that, we're talking about bringing the generation and digital divide, narrowing them together, so I think that is like something very interesting to follow in these parts of the world, for sure. And I think like for that, like you need um, nonprofits, you need government, you need school systems, everyone coming together, and not just in the developing world. I think like also this is also valid in the developed world as well, like doing that.
Yeah, completely agree. No, I think I think as well, not you guys in particular, but
Yeah.
like you mentioned earlier, the world is so connected now, and it's not
Mm,
just connected from an internet standpoint, it's the supply chain of like, well, we need to get this mineral from here to
yeah.
build this thing in this other place to put it
Yeah.
into this computer over there, and then it all gets
Mm,
put together over here, and then it's shipped over
mhm,
there. And the kind of second and third order effects,
yeah.
I think are very difficult for humans to wrap their brains around just because w- it's a new thing. It's a new
Hmm.
phenomenon. Like the last 20, 30 years. I mean, obviously before that a little bit, but it's really like
Yeah.
less than one generation that's had to deal with that,
Mm,
or one generation that's had to
yeah.
deal with that.
Mm,
And so the second and third order effects of like, oh, let's just make this change here. And then all of a sudden
yeah.
you see like some random effect of like, oh, all of a sudden like this group is not getting
Yeah.
their fair share of the money because money is being
Yeah.
put like, so all these things is, and it's so difficult to wrap your head around that. And
Mm,
I wonder how much of that you would have the numbers for it. So to go back to your data company, you'd have the
mm,
numbers for some of these things, but you still need the analysts to kind of figure out the framing and figure out the problem set and to consider like, okay, we've got these numbers for
mm,
these sales here and those sales over
mhm,
there and for this
mhm,
product marketability over here. But then how do you train people, or how do you think of these kind of problem sets and like, oh, let me run the numbers if we
mhm,
change XYZ variable? Because now it's simple if you've got one or two variables, but the world now is like hundreds of variables for every single equation, and it's difficult
mhm,
to isolate them to say, oh, what happens
mhm.
if we change only this one? It's like, well,
Yeah.
then all these other ones will change as well. So that
Mhm.
becomes kind of a numbers problem in terms of predictions and things like that. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Uh, I think like what you're saying in that framing of that question is quite interesting, because the data is a part of it. So like let me start with like how we think of three important parts in our company. One is data. Data is our most important resource, right? It's like water. If you can have clean water, if you drink that, it can be life nourishing blood for your body. Same goes for organization with data, right? If you have a dirty data, not so good for your health, not so good for your company either, right? So data is the most important resource. Then you have the decision, which is the most important action you can take on it, right? Depending on what I decide as a conscious decision, it can have some effect down the road. Now, if you just leave it as it is, it will continue on that path. But if you correct it with measuring it, then you might be able to make better decisions. Now, you have these two things. Like, so you have a resource, most important resource, and you have a most important action. And then you need to think about your most important asset, which is people. So how do you get people to make the best decision using the most important resource you have, right? That is the equation. um, so this is like our focus both internally and externally. So what we do internally is of course that, because that is the most control we have in the situation, right? So that is the best case scenario. So what we do is like we have 3 or 4 training modules that we have developed, which is a is just the data foundations. How do you use data to become more efficient? How do you use the tools? How can you use the business intelligence tools versus data engineering tools? How you can do that, and all of those things, and how you can find the information out of it, right? And then usually, if you are data savvy, or you are not in the data tech domain, then you're most acquainted with the dashboards or reports that you're getting into. So you're monitoring KPIs, right? And eventually, like, there are two ways you can do that. One is you're monitoring the KPIs and you're seeing up or down or variance of it, how it is changing, and you're making decisions on it. Then you have either one layer down or two layer down or drill down effect, where you can see how it is happening. So the more analyst focused you are, you want more deeper, more drilling down features on it, right? So we encourage our people to think on those terms. We encourage them to do that, because the further you go down into granular details, you might be able to see something that that polarized dashboard is hiding, right? So that's what we do. So that is like where we help them get better with data, use that data to either recommend some solutions or make things better every single day, right? Now, on the other part, you have decision makers. Not everybody, well, everybody in companies making some sort of decision, but like, we have to narrow down into most impactful ones, which is either me as a CEO, who takes one decision that goes all the way down, right? So for us, we also have developed a different kind of thing, where we, everywhere we have a ops person who is doing the operations, and the other one is making a decision. So decision and operation, so like, you are basically collecting data on each decision we make. So very good example of that is, we decided to make our website from scratch, but we made it on the decision when we were doing A/B testing with the old version of our website, which was hosted on some other thing, like built using some external tool, versus the one we have built now. And we are able to see it, and we see the incredible performance here. So we decided to go on it. So we do that, and then we are constantly measuring it. So like, we know that decision was right. Then eventually, the third part of it, which is quite the most important part, because people doing things are comes down to the motivation, and doing people taking action on certain things come down to what they believe in, right? uh, Salary, money, a very good motivator of doing things, right? but in I also used to do DIB trainings and things. In long time ago, I was diversity officer for a university. So I know like how people think, in especially if you're coming from different background and things, right? And so like, if you can give people some sort of movement in terms of like what they believe in, and you can create that movement, that is the most impactful you can do to your organization. Because culture is like something that maybe brings people together, but if you once you have that drive to accomplish something as a group of people, I don't think there's like more intrinsically motivating factor than that. So our uh, training programs are tied into these three things. So internally we do that, and externally we also provide the service. But eventually, like, whenever we do any of our projects, let's talk about a very simple data foundation project where people have a very simple dashboard. We incorporate all of these three things. So that's why, like, what we see is that because we're incorporating all of these three things together, data, decisions, and people in it, we see like over 95% of our all models are deployed and in use. Everybody's getting the best use out of it, and this is the metric we measure, and this is how we see that we're actually providing a better service, right? And as soon as that goes down, like in production or in use, percentage goes down, we go back and we say like, okay, like, there's something is not working, people are not using it better, so how do we do that? And we do that.
Mm, makes sense. I want to wrap up with this one thing, and this is kind of
Yeah.
people as the data. You mentioned Google Analytics earlier. There's a
Mm,
big push. I don't know if it's so much in Spain
mm,
or Barcelona, but people here are
yeah.
very concerned with the big tech companies and stealing data,
Yep.
or maybe not stealing, but kind
Mm,
of the terms. I agree, or I have read the terms and conditions, I think is the biggest lie
yeah.
that's ever been told. Um, and so your thoughts on that, right? The big tech companies, you've got data that's out there all the time, right? People
Yeah.
talk about data breaches, and
Mm,
I think the Social Security Administration a couple weeks
mm,
ago had a bunch of Social Security numbers
yeah.
breached.
Yep.
Um, obviously you as somebody that uses data, and for you, the more data, the
Mm,
better. But from a personal side, people listening, like, what are your thoughts on what the big tech companies are actually doing with the data?
mm,
People are concerned that they're selling the data to these third parties, whether it's advertisers
mm,
or other things. But
mm,
the point I think that people are concerned with is that you don't really have control over it,
mm.
where it goes, and kind of you could build a picture of somebody, um, identity theft, things like that. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? As somebody that kind of lives in the space and uses data, and um,
Mm,
to the
mm-hmm.
people that would be concerned, what would you say to them?
Um, let me let me just first agree with whatever you said. Absolutely agree with that. I think personal data is something that as companies we should respect that, and we should do all of our best efforts in safeguarding those, keeping them safe. I know, like, we don't have completely full safe ways to protect data, and this is the risk we live in, right? We actually live in this kind of world where these breaches can happen. There's, I think, like, if you are a new college graduate, if you want to be sure that you will have a job for the next 20 years, go into cybersecurity. I mean, there's no denying that, because I think there are new ways. You always have to improve those systems. There's never going to be a fail-safe system. That is the one reality we live in. But I think on the other side of it, as a company, if we have some data from someone that can be personally identifiable, we have to do everything we can in the best practices as much as possible to keep that safe. That is our obligation. I think that is the least thing we can do, right? That is the, I think we have to think about that. Now, the second part of it, which may be a little bit contentious to a lot of people, is that um, if you think about data as some sort of resource, which it is, then let's say, like, Eric, you have a house, and under your house I found some oil. I cannot just go and dig it and sell it and make profit and sell and tell you that, like, oh, because you're buying this thing from them, like, you have to give me some share of it. I think this is just like, if you think about it in that perspective, I don't think, if data is a resource, then with any other resource you're not allowed to do that, right? Like, if I take oil out of your ground, I have to pay you a fair value for that, right? So this is one part of it, and I think um, this has been talked about, and this has been there, but I think this is very unfriendly to big tech companies and tech companies in general, because we've just been used to just mining the data, getting that information. We've created
Well,
ways
that's where you get into the
to.
terms and conditions, though, because you're
Yep.
right. If there's oil under my house, somebody
Yep.
can't just go get it. But on the
Yep.
flip side, right, using that example, the government can come and say with eminent domain and say, well, we need it for the good of the government, and so we're going to take your land and we'll give you
Right.
what we deem as fair value.
Right.
And so for the big tech companies, they'll say, well, you can't really use our platform if you don't agree to the
Yep.
terms and conditions. And so, like,
Mm,
yes, but also not really.
mm, mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I think on that case, like, it will come down to individuals making the decision, because this is how it is. And I think that in this case, like, you have to have better systems around it, better guardrails around it. So at least in EU, for example, you have GDPR, which is for which makes it mandatory for us to establish due care when dealing with the personal data. So this is a big issue that, like, a lot of tech companies, US based tech companies, have had to deal with in Europe. Google had to pay a lot of money and things like that. Uh, Now, like, for example, if you have a Chrome, uh, by default you don't have Google as a search engine in Europe, and a lot of these things, and those are different things than GDPR per se. But with GDPR, at least, like, we have to make sure that if there is any personally identifiable information, we have to do certain steps of doing that, like how to safeguard it, how to do that. And I think there is a bit of, like, a good movement there. It's not perfect by any sense. I think that's how modern rules are going to be. Like, I think, for example, EU also just released the AI Act, and it is not a perfect fail-proof system. I think gone are the days when you just wrote something on paper and that became the law. Now, like, you have to have that law and you constantly iterate into making it better, to account for situations that we don't know about. Like, the thing is, like, I'm talking about data as an expert now, but the thing is, like, I'm constantly learning new things every day. Like, I think there are so many things that my brain cannot still comprehend or put together. There are so many consequences that we don't know about and things. And I think that's why I think, like, having big tech companies be in this equation, coming together as a corporate responsibility and how they can do better, is probably the best way, because they have the best information out of everyone about this thing, right? I mean, look at Facebook. Like, Facebook feed is pretty much like not usable these days, because I barely see anyone who's connected to me there, and I'm just bombarded with ads that are not relevant to me at all. And that's because I have an iPhone, and I've asked iPhone not to let Facebook track things on my phone.
Yep.
So so
I do the same.
simple thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So a simple thing like that. uh, of course, Apple is branding security as one of the main things, and privacy and things, like, for at least like last couple of years they've made it like their main thing. But that's impacted Facebook quite a bit, like the way they deliver ads, the way they target you and things. And I think if Apple can do that with one platform, one big platform, there must be a way to do across the whole system, right? So, and I think, like, there has to be a better way of doing it, and that's why, like, I was going back into it. I think if there was a way, and I don't have like a perfect way to do it, like going back to this oil analogy and things like that. If you have oil, then you can make decision whether you want to sell that oil or not. As a user, if Facebook told me, we will do these ads and I'll give you X% of this revenue back because I'm using your data, should I sell it or not? Would that be one way of thinking about it?
Well, that would be
You know?
nice if they paid me for my data. I would. Oh, yeah. No, no, no. I know what I completely know what you mean. And uh, the solutions is more. There's not to come up with the solution from like an enterprise level is
Yeah,
near impossible due to, well, you've got people running all these things, and so people make decisions that sometimes we don't understand.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's a difficult situation for sure. But I think the one thing that you said, like asking the app not to track if you have an iPhone,
Mm,
is
yeah.
is a very easy and big step into protecting your own data and that.
Yeah.
So um tell the people where, if they're interested in learning more about you and your company or the project with Ian, where can they go find it? And links will be in the description of course, but where should the people go to find it, find more information or support maybe if that's an option as well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely find me on LinkedIn. I'll also say send that to you, Eric, and you can add that there maybe. Of course, like our website, gottdata.com. In the near future, we will be launching separate website for some of the things we're doing, and maybe we will also include that in the future. But as of now, like, these are the best two ways of going and staying in touch with us and following us. We will, so, for example, the project that we are doing in Nepal, we are like completely doing it out of our pocket. We don't have anything. So in the near future, we might do a GoFundMe to. So if that resonates with any of your listeners, that would be great. Like, if you could help us a little bit with that, because um, we're we can do certain parts of it by ourselves, but if we get more funding, we can probably expand that a little bit and help some of these young women in different ways as well. A lot of them have dreams of going to universities and applications, college applications, and some of these things too. So maybe that can be very useful for them.
Yeah, very nice. Any final thoughts before we get you out of here?
Thank you so much for inviting me. That was such an interesting conversation. I did not think we would go into so many different things, but it was a lovely conversation, and I hope like your listeners find it really interesting as well, and also like amazing talking to you. That was super fun. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your time. For you guys listening, go check out the links in the description, as always, and we will see you guys next time. Peace.